Welcome back, everybody. Happy Monday to you. Your political wake-up call continues for about a half hour more. I'm Cory Smith.
And I'm Hillary Howard. So it is nearing 1 year on President Trump's second term, and much of his focus has been on foreign policy.
Now, the president ran as a peacemaker, pledging to end the war in Ukraine and the offensive in Gaza. But has his push resonated with the broader public? This morning, we're joined by Ransom Miller. He's a research associate at the Institute for Global Affairs. Ransom, thank you so much for joining us this Monday morning. We know each year your think tank polls Americans on their views of U.S. foreign policy. What did this year's questionnaire tell you?
Well, it told us a couple of different things. I think the big headline is that more Americans disapprove of Trump's foreign policy than approve of it. And the way we found that out was we asked about 13 different foreign policy issues. And on 11 out of those 13, more Americans say Trump is making things worse than better. And only on a single issue, international drug trafficking, do more Americans say Trump is making things better than worse. Also, given 4 different choices of poor, fair, excellent, or good about how the president and his cabinet are performing, 50% of Americans say Trump is performing poorly. So the current outlook for the president is not very good, but ultimately his supporters continue to stick behind him.
It was interesting that 3/4 of the people you spoke with oppose military force without congressional approval. Now, we've seen the Senate at least twice turn down the idea of congressional authorization for any sort of war, particularly as we look at the Caribbean buildup with regard to Venezuela. Can you kind of flesh that out a little bit for us?
Yeah, this is a question we've fielded for about 8 years now, and every year the support for it has been pretty universal. Around 3/4 of Americans have always supported war powers as written in the Constitution, but ultimately that is not the way this is seen in Congress, and so it has continued to be broadly unpopular with the sort of congressional authorities. Now, what I will say as well is the sort of breakdown partisanship sort of changed this year a little bit. Last year, it was both Republicans and Democrats, around 3/4. In fact, more Republicans supported congressional war authorities than Democrats did last year. This year, there's a 44 percentage gap, with almost all Democrats in favor of congressional war powers and only 50% of Republicans in favor. So it's still a bipartisan consensus. It's one of the few areas of remaining bipartisan consensus, but the sort of gap has risen quite a bit.
So we know you all also asked folks to describe how they feel about the president's foreign policy in their own words. Americans describe Trump as reckless 30% of the time, destructive 28% of the time, and tough 25% of the time in terms of that's what they think. In terms of the GOP, they're likely to describe Trump as tough and intelligent, 47% of folks saying that. Dems describe him as reckless, with 52% saying reckless and 48% saying destructive. What do you make of that sort of partisan split between the GOP and Democrats?
Again, it's striking just how different the pictures of what's happening in this country are. I mean, the sort of division between the sort of positive and negative adjectives we presented here were really quite striking. But I think also one of the important things to note is that, the third most popular Republican talking point or Republican adjective here to describe Trump's leadership style was peacemaker. Which is part of why we ended up titling this report Reckless Peacemaker, because it just struck us as totally fascinating that the president can, go to war with Iran, can attack boats off the coast of Venezuela, and yet still have a third of Republicans describing him as a peacemaker. And I think part of the reason that is that very few Americans are describing him as a warmonger or an imperialist. The types of terms that would sort of generate this kind of animus against the president's actions, that doesn't really exist in as high figures as maybe we would suspect. So there's something interesting, something paradoxical about the way that Trump has been able to tap in to the American electorate's feelings about foreign policy and the Republican base's feelings especially.
We've seen so many things unfold very rapidly over the past 10 months, and one of the first was disbanding USAID, which meant we were stepping back from the world stage and soft power. Another is that China has been taking advantage of that, right? Going in where we have left to fill the space and create all of these alliances with people. So I'm curious what people have to say about America involvement overseas, soft power, and China.
Yeah, on China, I think people are very disappointed with how the president is performing. I think it's important to note that we fielded this survey around the time of October 6th to 14th. This was a period of pretty high tensions with China before the meeting with Xi in Busan. I also think that it was the least approved issue area of all of the ones we surveyed on. Out of 13, most Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of China policy. And then that also includes a quite significant minority of Republicans. Almost 24% of Republicans also say that Trump has made things worse with China since his return to office. So I think in general, I think you're seeing that among a lot of the Democratic folks, they're saying free trade is important to us. The president's handling of foreign trade has not been good, and so I think among Democrats, that is my sort of reading of the feeling there. Among Republicans, I think on China there is more of a feeling that maybe Trump has not gone harsh enough in some respects. That his sort of continuing efforts to build coalition with the Chinese government has sort of been to the detriment of the United States. And one of the issues that we really looked at for that was Americans' willingness to accept Chinese students at U.S. universities. A majority of Americans, want Chinese students to come and study at American universities, but it's much more divisive among Republicans. A plurality of Republicans oppose Chinese students coming to study at American universities. And we've seen that be a really big point of controversy between the president and MAGA over the last couple months. I think on the issue of soft power, what we were really looking to figure out is how Americans perceive foreign aid and what foreign aid has done for our country in the past few years. And what we generally found was that people tend to feel that we perhaps were spending too much on military aid, but then maybe not as much as we should be on humanitarian and development aid, stuff that's helping people in foreign countries get off their feet. But I also think it's a little bit difficult to sort of gauge the Americans' electorate's feelings about something as nuanced as soft power that may just not be on top of mind for most voters.
Ransom, we've got some data from your study on both the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza. I'll let you pick which one sort of stands out to you most when you guys look through the numbers.
Yeah, I think the war in Gaza, I think, is probably the more interesting one to handle now. About 50% of Americans describe Israel's campaign in Gaza as a genocide. Excuse me, that's wrong. 50% of Democrats describe Israel's campaign in Gaza as a genocide, which is a little bit lower than we had seen in other polling data, and might be indicative of something changing during that period when the ceasefire was being negotiated. Also, Americans really sort of are debating this issue of what is the right approach to Israel's war in Gaza, with many more this year than last, saying that the United States should restrict military aid until a ceasefire can be achieved.
That was interesting to see. How does this rank with past surveys, this change when it comes to Israel?
Yeah, it's a percentage increase, I think, of about 8% or something like that, but I'm not quite positive on the number there.
So let's take a step back in terms of what the American people want from their president when it comes to foreign policy. Democrats want a president who will stand by U.S. allies. 49% of the folks you surveyed said that. Republicans place a greater premium on protecting U.S. industry, 47%, and military strength. If you're the White House, maybe, and I'll ask you to maybe to put your campaign thinking hat on, what is the message to Americans who voted for a president who said, I am America first, yet we're seeing multiple involvements in foreign conflicts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the message is that Republicans are a little bit skeptical. There is a growing and significant minority of Republicans that seem to be saying that perhaps the president has taken a wrong step on some of his foreign policy platform. The sort of two big issues where that is significant were tensions with China and foreign trade. So I think the sort of standing by allies and that other stuff, I think for a lot of the president's base, that is really appealing. Because the president is holding allies accountable for what they feel like maybe the president has, or the United States rather, has really been getting an unfair deal in the past. So I think in terms of those maybe broader issues like allies that are really resonating with a lot of Democrats. These issues around tariffs and trade, I think, are really the ones that are going to be galvanizing the Republican base in the years to come. And those are the ones that the president really has to look out for, because the trade off that he's asking for is for people in the short term to be willing to pay more for their daily basket of goods, groceries, basics, in order for in the long term to sort of rejuvenate American industry. That's kind of the, I guess, thesis of a lot of this MAGA foreign policy. And I think what we've seen in the last year is him kind of going into this headstrong with kind of a mandate, but then backing off it as he sees the sort of stock market react to it. I think the public has also sort of registered this kind of very sort of back and forth execution of policy, I think, pretty strongly. And so I think that's really something of concern for the White House.
All right, Ransom Miller with the Institute for Global Affairs, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.